As the Shemitah year comes to its conclusion, we're now looking towards the mitzvah of shmittas kesafim. This is the opportunity of the general populace to take part in the mitzvahs of Shemitah. Shemitah as a whole is mostly a mitzvah of farmers. They must stop working their land, not gather the fruits, and this doesn't have much relevance to the majority of people that do not work the land. However, at the end of Shemitah, there's a mitzvah that is for all of us, shmittas kesafim. It's a little bit similar to mitzvahs. In the 6 years of the Shemitah cycle, we have, instead of Shemitah, we have the mitzvahs of mitzvahs, Trumas, mitzvahs, Meiser Sheni, Meiser Ani, which also primarily pertain to the farmers. But as we all know, Meiser does not apply only to farmers. Just like we have Meiser of Peiros and Yerakos and produce, we also have Meiser kesafim that applies to all of us. Similarly, in the 7th year, we have this great mitzvah of Shemitah that applies to the farmers. But all of us, at the end of Shemitah, as Shemitah closes, have the mitzvah of shmittas kesafim. Just like a farmer must leave his land and let go, let HaKadosh Baruch Hu be in charge, so too all of us, when we have money that's owed to us, when Shemitah comes, we must let go of our loans. Shemitah in general is known to be a mitzvah of great Mesiras Nefesh. Giboirei koyach was said on the farmers that keep Shemitah, to leave their source of livelihood. Similarly, shmittas kesafim is a mitzvah of great Mesiras Nefesh. Someone could have a very large loan and be mitzvah to leave his loan in the hands of the lender. So the pasuk about shmittas kesafim, miketz sheva shonim tasa shmita. Miketz means the end. At the end of 7 years, meaning the end of the year of Shemitah. Zedvar hashmita shomoit. Let go of your loans. Kol baal mashe yodoy asher yashem bere'ehu lo yigois es re'ehu ves ochiv ki kora shemita l'shem. Anyone who is owed money, let go of your loan, release the lender from the loan. There's 2 parts. There's a mitzvahs aseh and a mitzvahs lo aseh. Mitzvahs aseh, shomoit, let go. A mitzvahs lo aseh, lo yigos, do not collect your loan. Actually, there's machlokes. What exactly lo yigos mean? What exactly is the lav here? Is the lav to attempt to collect the loan just by walking over to the borrower and saying, you owe me such and such? You will then be over on the lav of lo yigos. And the other opinion is lo yigos is only if you actually collect the money. Just by asking for the loan, it's not lo yigos. This machlokes is only nogea to the lav of lo yigos. But in any case, there's a mitzvah to say shemot, let go of your loan, and that is a mitzvah aseh, to not collect the loan, to not ask for the loan, to try to obtain a loan. What's the reason for shmittas kesafim? The chinuch, who writes tamim for almost all of the mitzvahs, writes that shmittas kesafim is to teach us midas hanedivus va'ayin tova, to have a good eye, to want to give. This seemingly obvious time for the mitzvah of letting go of a loan for a poor person, let's say, that cannot pay his loans, and every 7 years he is released from the loans, and we are teaching ourselves the midah of giving, the midah of caring for others. But he adds another time for the mitzvah. Habitochon hagodol b'Hashem baruch hu. This is a mitzvah in which we instill in ourselves bitochon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where is the chinuch coming from? How is shmittas kesafim related to bitochon? It appears that this chinuch is going based on a Rambam. The Rambam talks about shmittas kesafim at the end of the perek in Shemitah V'Yova that discusses shmittas kesafim. The Rambam says, "Hiftiach HaKadosh Baruch Hu schar al mitzvah zu ba'olam hazeh." HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised schar in this world for this mitzvah. All mitzvahs we get schar n'olam haba, but specifically this mitzvah there's schar ba'olam hazeh. Shenemar nosoin titin loy v'lo yera levavcha b'sitcha loy ki b'glal hadovar hazeh yivarechecha Hashem alikecha b'chol ma'asecha u'v'chol mishlach yedecha. It shouldn't pain you to give your brother, to give him the loan and to release the loan, because Hashem will bless all your businesses, your work, in a way that you will not lose from it. Apparently, the Rambam is learning, just like by shmittas karka, the farmer must leave his land, and he's leaving his source of livelihood, and the Torah says, it's okay. If you're going to ask yourself, what will we eat in Shemitah? I'm going to give a bracha on the 6th year for 3 years. The 6th year will grow produce that will be equal to normal produce of 3 years, such that when a farmer is doing shmittas kesafim, when a farmer is keeping the mitzvah of shmitah, part of the tzura of the mitzvah is to rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu that his bracha will reimburse him for this mitzvah. And similarly, by shmittas kesafim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you will not lose from shmittas kesafim, which puts into this mitzvah the aspect of bitachon. So how exactly does shmittas kesafim work? There's a basic machlokes here. The Yereim, shittas Yereim, is that when shmitah draws to a close, the debts do not automatically become cancelled. The borrower still owes the money to the lender. It's just that the lender has a mitzvah to release the borrower from the chayv. He has to go, according to the Yereim, the lender must walk over to the borrower after Shemitah and say, Mishamitani, I'm releasing the debt. That's his mitzvah aseh. If he doesn't do it, the borrower actually must go and pay his debt because it still exists. This is the shita of the Yereim. However, the majority opinion is that shmittas kesafim works automatically. As soon as Shemitah draws to a close, the debts are automatically cancelled and the love does not owe the money anymore. When does the malveh need to actually do something to cancel the debt? That's when the love from his own accord comes to pay the malveh. The love might be somebody that doesn't know about shmittas kesafim, or he doesn't care about shmittas kesafim, or he feels that to be menschlich, he needs to pay. And he comes over to the malveh and he says, here, I'm paying you back the chayv. The malveh has a mitzvah to say, mishametan, I am releasing you from the debt. This is learned from the lashon of the pasuk that I quoted earlier, v'zeh dvar hashmita. Literally, dvar means word. This is the word of Shemitah. This teaches us that Shemitah, part of the mitzvah of Shemitah is with words. And when is that? When the lover, when the borrower comes over to the lender and says, I would like to pay back the debt, the malveh must say, Mishametani, I am releasing you from this debt. By saying those words, he's mekayim the mitzvah of zeh dvar hashmita shamoit, to release the borrower from his debt. What's with Bizman Hazeh? We know there are many mitzvahs that only were noheg once upon a time. So what is with shmittas kesafim? There's another mitzvah that has to do with Shemitah, which is Yovel. That's every 50 years. There's a mitzvah that avodim, when there's a Jewish slave, he becomes released. Lands that were bought from a Jew to a Jew go back to their original owner in Yovel. And as most of you must know, there has not been Yovel in the past 50 years or 100 years or thousands of years. The reason for that is because Yovel was given to Am Yisrael only in the time when they are residing in Eretz Yisrael in the ideal fashion, meaning all of Am Yisrael, or most of Am Yisrael, is residing in Eretz Yisrael, but not only that, everyone is in their place. Shevet Reuven in the land of Reuven, Shevet Shimon in the land of Shimon, the Levim in their cities. All of Am Yisrael is settled in Eretz Yisrael, ideally in their place. That's when the mitzvah of Yovel was given. Now, there are a number of mitzvahs that are connected with Yovel, and were learned out from Sukkim to connect them to Yovel. and they are not noheg when Yovel is not noheg. For example, Eved Ivri, the concept of a Jewish slave, buying a Jewish slave for 6 years, is not noheg. It's impossible to do that today, simply because Yovel is not noheg, and many related mitzvahs are not noheg today. So as far as shmittas kesafim is concerned, this is a machlokes tanoim between Rebbe and Chachamim, whether we relate shmittas kesafim to Yovel, and therefore say that it's not noheg bezman hazeh when Yovel is not noheg. According to Das Chachamim, shmittas kesafim is min haTorah is not noheg bezman hazeh, and according to Rebbe, it is not related to Yovel. And even though Yovel is not noheg bezman hazeh, shmittas kesafim is yes noheg bezman hazeh. So, as this many times happened, this starts out as a machlokas tanoim, and later on a machlokas had a paskin, machlokas rishonim. There are those who actually hold halach l'maisa that there is shmittas kesafim min haTorah bezman hazeh. There's another opinion that it is not noheg min haTorah bezman hazeh, but it is noheg midirabanan bezman hazeh, like many mitzvahs that are not noheg min haTorah bezman hazeh. We have a takana dirabanan to nevertheless do it, so that this mitzvah should not be forgotten, to keep this mitzvah alive, so to speak, so that eventually it will come back when Am Yisrael comes back to Eretz Yisrael in the proper way. We keep the mitzvah alive by doing it today, even though there's no chiyuv deraisa. There's a third opinion that me'ikar hadin, there's no shmittas kesafim, not deraisa, not derabanan, it's only a midas chasidus. The ikar lahalacha is that shmittas kesafim is not bizman hazeh midirabanan, and therefore we're makbid to be the mekayim, the halachos of shmittas kesafim. What kind of debts are included in shmittas kesafim? So the obvious case would be, you lend your friend or someone else, they ask you, I need $200, you lend them the money, and that is the most classic case of shmittas kesafim. Another case that people might not realize, a woman knocks on her neighbor's doors, please can I borrow some eggs, can I borrow some vegetables, can I borrow flour, anything that people borrow. That is also an halva. It's not money, it's a halva of a food, of an object. And I'm lending it to you and you give it back to me. That's also an halva, and shmittas kesafim applies to that equally. There are some exceptions to debts of shmittas kesafim. Two of the most common are hakofas chanus. In many stores, you go into the store and you buy items in the store, and instead of paying at the end, he writes down how much you owe, and then you come again and he writes that down, and eventually at one point you make a cheshbon and you pay. So the Mishnah says that hakofas chanus, money that is written down in the stores, money that you owe for purchases, is not part of shmittas kesafim. It's not considered to be a loan. The time really hasn't come for this payment to be made. And therefore, shmittas kesafim does not apply to it. Another case is someone who does work for you, comes one day to do work, another day to do work, and you still haven't paid him. That is also not considered to be a loan for shmittas kesafim. However, this is kind of tricky. There are certain cases where these kinds of debts can turn into actual loans through zekifa b'milva. It's when certain actions are done, we consider these debts to have turned into a loan. For example, when you sit down in the store and you make a cheshbon of how much money you owe, or you koveya a date, specific date when you plan on paying it, that can transfer the store debt into a bona fide loan, and shmittas kesafim will apply to it. When exactly is shmita meshamet? There's a machlokes rishonim about this also. According to the Das Yochid of the Rosh, shmittas kesafim actually begins. It has two stages, and it begins in the beginning of Shemitah. Meaning, when Shemitah starts, a lender may no longer approach the borrower and ask him for the money. The borrower still owes the money, but the lender may not ask for it. During the entire year of Shemitah, that's the first stage in which the lover really needs to pay, but the malva cannot go after him, cannot ask him for the money, cannot go to Beis Din to try to get them to get involved. He just needs to wait for the lover to come and pay him. When Shemitah comes to a close, then the debt becomes canceled. This is Shittas HaRosh, that Shmittas kesafim actually begins in the beginning of the Shemitah. The majority opinion, which basically is the Ikar Halacha today, is that the entire shmittas kesafim is at the end of Shemitah, which is where we're holding now, as Rosh Hashanah will fall. The new year will come in, the 7th year will finish, the 8th year will start, and that at that moment will be the one moment of shmittas kesafim in which all debts, all outstanding debts are cancelled, and Malveh may no longer collect them. When there is a debt, that the payment date is after Shemitah. For example, in Rosh Chodesh Elul, I lent my friend $200 for 2 months. He now needs to pay me on Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. I cannot come and collect it before Rosh Hashanah during Shemitah. It's uncollectible. At the end, as Shvius draws to a close, this is an uncollectible loan because the date is only after Sukkot, Aleph Cheshvan. So this is discussed in the Gemara. What we are nokate lehalacha is that such a chayv is not, the shmittas kesafim does not apply to such a chayv because it kind of didn't exist. It wasn't a collectible chayv as Shemitah ended. And for that reason, shmittas kesafim entirely doesn't apply to this kind of chayv. An interesting question is what we call a stam halva'a. There's a halacha, if someone asks you for, lend me $50, you pull it out and give it to him. You don't talk about when it's going to be paid and under what time or condition. You just give the halva without discussing it. Yeah, you'll pay me. I'm giving it to you. The halacha is that such a debt, such a loan is considered to be a loan for 30 days. Okay, so if I take such a loan, if I give such a loan, let's say on Aleph Av, so of course 30 days pass, he owes me the money on Aleph Av. For some reason he didn't come to pay it immediately. That chayv is a regular chayv. When Rosh Hashanah comes, Shemitah will finish, and that chayv will be cancelled. However, what happens if I give such a loan, a stam halva, a loan without a designated date on Tesvav Elul? So now when Rosh Hashanah comes, the date of payment date has not really come yet because this is a halva for 30 days, even though it wasn't stipulated beferish, but this is how we understand the stam halva to be 30 days. And is this debt cancelled or not? So one way would be to say, no, it's not cancelled. The date didn't come yet. The date for halva that was given bistam on Tesvav Elul is Tesvav Tishrei, 30 days later, which is the Sukkot, and the time has not yet come on Rosh Hashanah. The other way of seeing it is no, a stam halva is not like when a loan is given with a date that's after Rosh Hashanah, so it's completely uncollectible when Rosh Hashanah comes. A stam halva is not exactly uncollectible. I could come to you and say, you owe me the money. We didn't say a date. So until 30 days, we give the borrower time to pay because no date was specified, but the loan, so to speak, still exists on Rosh Hashanah, and therefore it is cancelled on Rosh Hashanah at the end of Shemitah. So that's a machlokas, how to consider stam halva. So now let's get to what we're all thinking of, which is Takonas Hillel of a Prusbul. The Sifri says, before we get to a Prusbul, there's something in the Mishnah called Moser Shtaroisav LeBeis Din. Someone who hands over his shtori chov, his loan documents, he hands it over to the court before Shemitah is over. So when someone has a whole package of loan documents, people owe him, he goes over to the court and says, here, take these documents, their time has come, I'm giving them to you, go run after the borrowers to collect the money from me. Once that action has been done, before the end of Shemitah, when Shemitah is finished, it does not cancel these loans. This is based on the drasha in the Psukim, sheyesh lecha sachicha, that the concept of shmittas kesafim is a loan that the lender is is running after the borrower to pay back, and then Shemitah comes and it cancels it. However, once the lender has handed over his loan documents to the Beis Din to be in charge, this already is not between the borrower and the lender. This has been given over to Beis Din. It's Beis Din's job now to run after the borrower, and therefore shmittas kesafim doesn't apply to it. So that's the concept of Moshe Dubin Beis Din. So here Hillel came along and made a takana called pruzbul. Hillel saw in his time that poor people were coming to rich people and asking them for loans. And rich people were refusing to give loans because they were worried what's going to happen when the end of Shemitah comes and my loan will be canceled. So this is a problem for both the Amim that are asking for the loans and for the Ashirim that are refusing to give the loans. For the Amim, they're not getting loans, which is very bad for them. And for the Ashirim, this is also a problem because by refusing to give a loan because of Shemitah, they are being over on what the Pasuk says. There's a lav, actually. Pen yala belibcho, dover beliyah, leimor, hine karva. Shnas hasheva. V'ro'incha be'ochicha. The Torah uses very strong language to condemn someone who's approached for a loan and refuses to give the loan because he is worried about the mitzvah of Shemitah. So we had a problem here that Anim were getting their loans and the Ashim were being over on a Isser, and to avoid this, Hillel was misaken a pruzbul. A pruzbul is a way to get out of the mitzvah of Shemitah, to avoid the mitzvah of Shmittas kesafim. Now, how does it work, a pruzbul? There's two main shittas in Rishonim, how it works. According to Shittas Rashi, pruzbul is an easy way of Moshe Dubin Beis Din. We discussed a few minutes ago the concept of taking your loan documents, giving them to Beis Din, and saying you're in charge of collecting these halachos. It's not my business anymore, and from that point on, shmittas kesafim doesn't apply. So a pruzbul is a way to streamline the process, as I'm not actually going to hand over the loan documents, but it's as if I'm passing over the loan documents to Beis Din. I come in front of Beis Din and I say, I'm now officially handing over to you the job of collecting these halachos. And it's as if I gave you the loan document, and it turns into an issue between Beis Din and the borrower, and therefore shmittas kesafim is not noheg. That's one shita. Another shita is that pruzbul doesn't exactly work to be mevatel the din of shmittas kesafim min haTorah. Pruzbul is just a takanas chachamim. Now, chachamim have very strong powers in general, but specifically in monetary matters. There's a concept called hefker, Beis Din hefker. Beis Din has the ability to confiscate property from whoever it deems necessary to do so. So this is just a takana to circumvent shmittas kesafim using the power of koach Beis Din hefker, Beis Din hefker, to declare that even though in Torah the debt is cancelled, we're making a takanas chachamim that the debt should remain using the koach of hefker, Beis Din hefker. Now, chacham didn't want to make this blanket thing just on a flat against the Torah. It's unclear if they can, but that's not how they did it. And what they said is that whoever is interested in circumventing the mitzvah of shmittas kesafim will come in front of Beis Din and say the words, I'm committing the chayv to you, and by doing that, this takana will apply to them. So according to this shita, there's no actual transferring of the debt to Beis Din to be in charge of collecting. What's going on here is just making a declaration in front of Beis Din. Basically, I am interested that the takanas chachamim that goes against the din haTorah of shmittas kesafim will apply to me, and then the takanas chachamim kicks in, hefker, Beis Din hefker, which cancels shmittas kesafim. There is an issue. Who exactly are the dayanim in front of whom one must do a pruzbul? One daya is that it must be the Gdolei Hadara, the biggest Beis Din of that generation. They're the ones with the koach of hefker, Beis Din hefker, and they can be mevatel chovos. Another sheet, it has to be a Beis Din that was appointed to be the Beis Din in this city. That's basically the psak of the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, As a maker, like other opinions, it could be any three people. Three people, some say need to be knowledgeable about mominus, about shmittas kesafim, but l'maisa lahalacha, we're not that any three people that you go to, they have the koyach of Beis Din, and you could go in front of them and do the pruzbul. How do we do the pruzbul? There's two parts to the pruzbul. One thing is you say over a prepared statement in front of Beis Din. That by that statement you are declaring your intention, according to some Rishonim, to transfer the chayvus to Beis Din. That is now their job to collect it. According to other Rishonim, by this statement, all I'm doing is declaring my will to be part of the pruzbul arrangement. In any case, there's something that you state to the court. That's one part. The other part is actually a piece of paper called a shtar pruzbul, in which the dayanim write down their names with their signature, and you take that piece of paper home. That can serve as proof that you actually went in front of Beis Din, you said what needed to be said in the pruzbul, and by that, the takanas chachamim of pruzbul is chal on you, and you may collect your debts. Two more points that I'd like to mention. One has to do with the time. That's written on a pruzbul. Pruzbul needs to have a time, a date. A date. When you write a pruzbul, on the top of the pruzbul, there will be written a date on the date that it was done. This is very important because a pruzbul only works for debts that were created before the pruzbul was written. If you lent money in Aleph Elul and then you did the pruzbul on Beis Elul, so the debts that were accrued on Aleph Elul, the pruzbul applies to them. However, if the day after you do the pruzbul, you accrue another debt, the pruzbul does not apply to that at all. Therefore, the date of the pruzbul is important because it shows that the pruzbul will not apply to debts that were done after that date. For this reason, it's very important that the date written on the pruzbul should not be a later date than the actual date. If you write on the pruzbul a later date than the actual date, it passes the entire pruzbul because it becomes a pruzbul of sheker. It becomes a pruzbul that's implying that this pruzbul works for more debts than it actually can, because a pruzbul cannot work for debts that were done at a later date. So therefore, if one is make sure when you're writing a pruzbul to write the correct date on the pruzbul. If it's done in a time when you're not sure what the date is, bein hashmashos, let's say, you must make the earlier date as opposed to the later date. The later date will cancel the entire pruzbul. One more point, there's an issue of banks. What about all kinds of chayvus that we have to banks? There were those who said that there is an opinion that banks do not need a pruzbul because they are all limited liability, and there's a svara that the whole concept of shmittas kesafim applies only when there is personal liability of the chayiv. That's the mitzvah of the Torah. Ploni owes you money, release the debt from him. But when there's just a company and no person has liability for the chayivus of the Beis Din, there is no shmittas kesafim. There are those who maintain that. However, there are those who say that we are choshet to shmittas kesafim also in banks, and therefore it's important for anyone that has chayivus of bank accounts to, yes, make a shmittas kesafim. Women also would need to make to make a pruzbul if they have any kind of cheshbon with a bank that's only in their name, not in their husband's name, a retirement account, any kind of monetary account in which is only in the woman's name, would require her to have her own pruzbul.